Hello everybody and welcome to J&H Presents Chat and Talk. My name is Ainsley Harris and I gotta tell you for real, I am not your host for this show. I'm really not. In New York City right now we're having this big snowstorm, and so most of our cast and crew could not make it for this very important taping for this show, but you know, as to go in theater in Hollywood, the show must go on. So I'm the producer, so I'm stepping in to do what has to be done. All right, but we thank you for allowing us into your living room, tablets, iPads, so however, on the internet, however you're watching the show, we're thankful. That's what the show is about, chat and talk. We're about to chat, and we're going to talk it up with some beautiful people, interesting people, from all spectrums you can think of, some artists, some cooks, some chefs, some politicians, you name it, we're going to talk about it, but we're going to do it in a fun way. Actually, this show is really a pilot for a series to come later on this summer called The Taste Show. So, and with that, as of now, on your screen you will see thetasteshow.com, and you'll see our email address, thetasteshow@gmail.com, and our telephone number to our studios, because we would like to know what you think about it, what you like, what you don't like, and what you would like to see. So give us a call. You see the numbers on the screen, and let us know what you think. All right. We gotta take a pause. We gotta say thank you for a couple of people who make the show very instrumental in making it happen. We gotta give a shout out to Mr. Drake Colley. That's right, give him a pause. If you don't know who he is, you ought to know. Alright? And also x2the.l.com. We gotta give them a hand, because without them, they were very instrumental in making the show happen. Alright, so what we got going on for today, this show? Oh man, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. We're gonna show you some interviews with, maybe some snippets of interviews with S. Navi, or maybe Darian, or maybe Abia, or maybe Monet. How about Miss Avery Sunshine? How about Mr. Willie Tolbert? Matter of fact, you know, we got a sample, sample snippet of what you're going to be seeing. Roll the tape. Let them see what we got going.
What it's all about. Ooh, it's a new day. I got something else to say.
We're here with S. Navi, and we're going to do a little poking around and find out what makes her tick. Now, you started singing at age 3. Is that
I started
right?
performing at age 3.
Okay, when did you start singing?
When I was in high school.
Okay, and when did you decide to turn professional?
After I graduated from college.
Yeah, and what prompted that decision?
After I graduated from high school, I was singing with local studios. And
This is in Milwaukee?
This is in Milwaukee, yeah. And, at that time, it was new to me that I discovered the talent, so I wasn't really sure that I wanted to pursue singing professionally. It seemed more like it's a hobby and something I enjoyed doing, because I always performed, so I always felt at home on stage. But, when I went to school, I still listened to music, and I found myself beginning to write songs all while I was studying in college. And it was like, after I graduated, it was still calling me, and I felt like I had to pursue it instead of taking the traditional route and going to work a 9-to-5 job. I felt like I would always say, oh my God, what would happen if I ever pursued, a singing career? So because it was within me, it just called me, and something said, pursue a career in singing. And that's
was there a particular triggering event, one particular thing that, made you realize that, gee, I'm going to explore this talent?
No, it was just, I guess it was just a buildup. Because it never, ever since I left high school, like my desire to sing and perform it never left. Although, because I didn't know I wanted to pursue it professionally, I felt like, okay, the smart thing to do is get a degree so I have something to fall back on and per se, you know, singing doesn't work out, or just go the traditional, like I said, the corporate world route. That's what I was thinking, but it never left my soul. Like the passion and desire to sing and perform, it never left me. And I felt like after I graduated that I had to make a choice that I want to start a career doing something that I wasn't sure that I really wanted to do. And I just saw myself like singing was just the only thing that I wanted to pursue.
Now there's obviously a wealth of musical talent coming out of the Midwest. And a lot of people from the Midwest, when they decide that they're going to go pro, they move to Chicago, some move to LA. What prompted your decision to move to New York?
I wanted to move to the most challenging place in America.
You did it.
I thought about Atlanta. For me, it wasn't Chicago because Chicago was still kind of familiar to me. It was between Atlanta and New York at that time because, you know, those are the two cities I've been to. Atlanta. I actually hadn't been to New York. It was just something about New York when I was thinking about singing, and I was just like, New York just seems like that's the place to go. But I only knew one person in New York, and I knew a lot of people in Atlanta. And I figured, like, if I moved to Atlanta, I might get too comfortable and not be as focused because it would just be too much like home. You know, the cost of living, the drive, it just didn't seem as hard to survive in Atlanta as it would be New York. So I decided to come to the most, like the complete opposite of Milwaukee and New York. I wanted something completely different and a city that I felt like if I can make my mark in this city, then I'm good. I can make my mark in the world. So
you prefer that to being a big fish in the small pond of Milwaukee?
Definitely.
Okay. Every artist is influenced by other artists. Who are the artists that influenced you the most when you first became aware of music?
You know, this is a question I'm asked all the time, and I know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, not like that. But when you say influence, you know, it's like that artist that when you're creating music, they're kind of in the back of your head, and when you're doing your passion, like that influence is somewhere burning within you.
Well, we may be talking about two different things because I'm asking you about early on. Okay, but we're going to get to the present as well.
Okay, because I think there's a difference between being influenced and being inspired by.
Okay, and what's
you know,
because
I can hear like influences in some people's music, and you hear right away like I hear that influence of that person, the artist's music. But anyway, when I was as I was growing up, I mean, I listened to Stevie Wonder, George Benson, Miles Davis, Aretha Franklin, Cyndi Lauper. I mean, a myriad of artists growing up. I mean, like I always loved music, even though I didn't have a voice to sing.
Well, we're here in Brooklyn in general, and in particular, we're here in Clinton Hill. And we're at the Clinton Hill Simply Art and Framing Gallery, and we're with our friend Loretta Brown. Loretta is known to the people in the community that have been here for a while as LB. We all know her as LB. And she's more recently known to some of our new neighbors as the Framing Lady. She's been a constant in this neighborhood since about 1991 or so, isn't that when you first opened? Mm-hmm. And so that means how many years have you been operating your business?
Well, we're into our 21st year.
Okay. And what about some of the other businesses that were open when you first started?
The businesses that were on Myrtle Avenue were basically your takeout Chinese restaurants, your barbers, your beauty parlors, your liquor stores. There were no real specialty businesses to service the community as it is today. Today, in 2012, is quite different than what it was in 1991. In fact, the location that I am and have been on Myrtle Avenue was really kind of depressed. I mean, there were no businesses other than the local bodega and myself, and many people said she's never going to make it. I wasn't as far down or close to downtown Brooklyn at that time where you had a lot of them. So to venture, to me, was really a destination. People literally came here to this business, got in their car, and left the block. That's what it was like in 1991. Today it's quite different. They're walking with their dogs, their baby carriages, 2 and 3. They're kind of sauntering up and down Myrtle Avenue. They have reached here. And again, it's still very interesting, because in 1991, I had one fella who was lost trying to find a BQE, and he came in as if an army was running behind him. He came crashing through the door, and he says, "I can't believe this place. You're like," what did he say? "You're like a gem in an oasis to a lost soul," or something of that nature. "How can I find a BQE? You're the safest place here." And all of this came out at once, and it really shocked me, because I never thought of it in that manner. Today, I have a number of tourists who are traveling through Brooklyn, basically coming from Williamsburg, and then they want to venture into Fort Greene and find the Brooklyn Bridge. They will come in and basically have the same kind of response to this particular business as well as my location. It's like, wow. So
Well,
that's
I
nice.
remember when I first came into your shop, and frankly, it was a Sunday afternoon. I was watching the football game. It was halftime, and I wanted to catch a slice. So I went right next door. It used to be, I think, called Castillo's Pizza at that time.
That was around mid-90s.
Right, and so I went there, and you were open on that Sunday.
Right.
And I came in, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. As a matter of fact, I remember in particular that there was a litho that I was interested in, and I'm very sorry to this day that I never acquired it. But that was my introduction to your shop. Well, let me ask you, okay, I understand that before you went into business, you were an advertising executive for one of our prominent publications in the community. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about that.
When I started in the industry, wonderful. It was a great career. It was grand.
Before we go much further, we should probably mention the name of the publication. As a matter of fact, the founder, I just found him on the United States postage stamp.
That's my last employer. That's John H. Johnson at Ebony Magazine. During that time, it was mid-'80s. It was a wonderful time for Ebony, and it was a great time for myself, because during that time, we were targeting the more upscale, affluent black readership of our publication.
Hey, you like that? You like that? I hope you do. I know you do. If you don't, give us a call again. Once again, we want to hear from you. Tell us what you think. And believe me, when you dial that number, this phone will ring. All right, so you like that? Cool. We're going to take another pause for the cause, another commercial break, and we're going to be right back.
Well, we're here with Willie Torbert, and we really have a lot of questions that we want to ask about his art and how he developed as an artist. And so I guess my first question is, when did you first realize that you were going to become an artist?
Wow. I would say grammar school. It started pretty early. I still remember the first day at school 6 in kindergarten, and I still remember my teacher. Her name was Miss O'Connor, a young white woman. And I was crying because I missed my mama, and I was crying. And she gave me some Play-Doh. And I started playing and molding it and making all kinds of objects. And then she gave me some paper and I was drawing. And I didn't notice it really that point, but I would say second, third grade is when I noticed I had something happening. And then I know that on one day it was open school night, my mother came to check my grades. Your parents checking you. I never had good grades. I had good art, but I never good grades, which didn't count for too much. I mean, in terms of it wasn't an art class, you know what I'm saying? But what happened, I found at those formative years, I liked to draw because it relaxed me. And it came to the point that I didn't like school. I didn't like math. I didn't like science. I didn't even do technical, and I had to open a book to really get deep and study. But I could just pick up a paintbrush or a pencil or crayon and just do colors and lines. And I was always these drawings with guys with big afros and suits because they was all around the project. So I kind of draw what I saw. A guy with a pick, a guy with an afro, and you know, I would draw stuff like Cadillac cars, and I would draw projects, and that was like grammar school time, you know. And at that time, it was interesting because, you know, it was a lot of bullies. We grew up in the projects. It's tough. You know, the people from Talbot Projects, it's a really tough community. And those same people attend the school where you go to in that tough community. You know, so every now and then someone would bully you actually for your milk money. My mother, you know, we had to have that milk every week, you know, about, what, 25 cents a week, man. I didn't want nobody to take it, but every now and then they got taken. Open school night, my mother came to open school night, and she discovered I was an artist because the teacher took out several of these drawings I did. I didn't realize she started collecting my drawings. And she showed my mother, it blew my mother away. My mother, oh my God, my son's an artist. And she knows that from a very young age that I had this kind of creative ability. And as I got a little older, it became a fetish almost because I would stay up late. And I still have a habit of staying up late because I draw and paint very late. You know, because it's a quiet time. It's like nocturnal. No one's something to read, you know. And what happened as a child, my mom would send us to bed. You know, you had, you know, go to bed in curfews growing up like I did. You didn't have that ass in the house at a certain time. You get a spanking. You know, so that was real. I grew up with that. They call it corporal punishment. We call it love and discipline back then. All right. And we would be sent to bed, but I would actually stay up. I would like put a sheet over my head with a flashlight, and I would draw during the night because I had to do it. And my mother, boy, go to bed, turn that flashlight, and take your ass to bed and put it on that drawing pad. You know, so it became something that I had to do after a while because it really relaxed me. And when I was in school feeling frustrated by a math equation or what have you, when the teacher would call upon me, I always knew that I can't do that math equation, but I said to myself, I can draw. And I realized that as a very young child, you know.
One of the things that was very common back in those days was the Board of Education not only would have, they would offer music and they would offer art classes in school, but every year they would drag you to hear the Buffalo Philharmonic,
Yes.
put you on a yellow bus at Kleinhand's Music Hall. And the other thing that they would do is once a year they would drag you to the Albright Knox Art.
Awesome, sure did. I went there many times.
Okay, and
Sure
so I was going to ask you whether or not going to the Albright Knox made an impression on you as a kid, you know, or did it take a little longer for what you saw to kind of click in?
Well, I would say for me, my high school art teacher was Mr. Fredericks, a Caucasian guy, you know, and it's my favorite class, man. He taught art, you know, and he was a very creative guy, and he was always tell me that Willie, you're very talented, you know, and he took us to RIT in Rochester Institute of Technology.
Okay, we're here with Monet and the singer, composer, multi-instrumentalist, artist. And so we're going to ask her a few questions and try to get to know her a little bit better. And I guess the first question I want to ask you is that a lot of artists seem to rush to release as much product as they can. In your case, there was a gap of about maybe 5 years or so between the release of your album Essence and the release of Life Size Mirror. And so, was there any particular reason for that?
All of my pieces are pretty much evolutions, and so they're born, and then I kind of bring them out and perform them. And sometimes I'm not excited about what happens when I bring them to life. So I don't want to commit them to a project. So a lot of times it's just a whole big process that happens when I'm working on music. So it takes time.
So how do you know when a song is ready?
When I can let it go.
Alrighty then. And from the new album, Life Size Mirror, the first single to be released from that was Vain. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who made that decision? Is that a decision that you made as the artist, or was that a company decision?
You know something? I am really into my family. And that's why I'm with them. So we pretty much have ongoing dialogue about everything. That's the best answer I can give you. It's definitely, you know, we talk.
Okay.
How do you feel about this? How did this move you? What do you think? I think this is working. Well, let's take a chance. What do you think? Maybe, maybe not.
So you let other people in on the creative decision process?
No, not always. I let, in terms of how we release things, how things are presented, I definitely lean on my people because they're brilliant, you know, and I go with the brilliance.
Now you had some really great musicians on your on the most recent record, like the percussionist Jeff Haynes, who was like a fabulous musician, and you also had a number of guest artists like Abby Dobson, who I think is like tremendous,
My girl.
and Maya Azucena.
Yep.
So what was it like to work with artists of that caliber?
Well, I've always been, I mean, they've reached out their hands for me, and I reach back. And I think that that's part of the beauty of this movement, is that there's a lot of each one reach one, you know. So you definitely don't get left behind, and you can pause and breathe and do all kinds of things because you find yourselves actually as guests together. And it's wonderful.
Now, one of the things that I noticed about your record, and it was true of Abby's record, Sleeping Beauty, didn't seem as though there were a lot of loops or a lot of canned. It seemed like real music being performed by real musicians.
Right.
Is that actually the way that it went?
Well, yeah, and in a lot of situations it depends. If you listen to some of the cuts on my project, you know, certainly where I'm playing acoustic guitar, you know, I'm playing. I just play straight through. And my music, I call my music organic soul. And the whole thing is that it's constantly forming. So even as we're recording, you know, it's still forming, which is why I reach to different producers, you know, to bring their flair, their verve to whatever it is that I'm doing. So that's what makes it so much fun and so good, you know, because like with Nick Rolfe with Awakening, he came over with his gorgeous self, and sat in my living room, and we started playing, you know, and then we came up with this whole feeling of awakening, and then I went to Steve with what Nick and I were working on, and Steve, being the genius that he is, just put his hand all up in it.
Okay, XODL is very, very happy to be here with Cecilia Loving. This is someone who I've considered a friend for years, okay? And she's really quite an accomplished person. When I first met her, she was a practicing attorney, and to an extent she still is, but I watched her progress into becoming a judge. But what I found even more fascinating is Cecilia has always been a very spiritual person, and so I've watched over the years as she developed her ministry. And so I'd like for you to, you know, talk to us a little bit about your professional path. How is it that you decided to become a lawyer? How is it that you decided then to become a judge? And what caused you to develop your ministry?
Well, Drake, I'm very happy to be here to talk to you. And as you mentioned, we do go back a long way in terms of practicing law before I even thought of being a minister. I think that everyone has a special calling on their life. Whether you are an architect or a nurse or whatever it is that you do, I think whatever you're passionate about is Spirit calling you to do a certain task. And I decided to become a lawyer when I was in college. And
Why?
well, it was, at the time, there were very few entertainment lawyers. And my background is in theater. And I wanted to be one of the first theater managers / entertainment intellectual property lawyers. And went on to get my Master's of Fine Arts in management for theater. And later, as I was working on that, the graduate degree, I knew that I would eventually practice law as a part of it. I sat in the theater one day in Detroit, where I'm from, and I looked around and I said, I want to know everything there is about producing a show. And eventually that catapulted into producing in the film and television industry. And so I had a broad background in management that I was able to also take into the legal profession. And while I was practicing law, I eventually did work in entertainment, but I did it from a litigation perspective.
You did some work for Mr. Cosby, didn't you?
Yes, I did work for Mr. Cosby, some for ABC, some for Chucky Thomas, a music producer. And while I was in the midst of practicing law, and had actually done it for about 20 years, Spirit called me to do something else. And spirituality, as you mentioned, has always been a part of my life from a little girl growing up in the inner city of Detroit. But I never thought of it as being a profession for me. But I sat in church one day and the call was very clear. But as many ministers will tell you, it's a call that I wanted to ignore. But a few years later, that call turned into a summons. And it was clear that this was something I was supposed to do. And I always believe that part of that calling is to do it in the form of writing. And so in addition to my ministry, Spirit Move, which is at www.spiritmovemuv.com. I always like to put in a plug for my ministry because that is first and foremost in my life. I have also written a number of books that are spiritual in nature.
I want to talk to you about some of those books, but we're going to get to that in a few minutes, okay? I want to actually ask you a little bit more about Spirit Move. XDL is very, very pleased to bring you Cecilia Loving. We spoke to her recently, and there were so many things that we wanted to chat about that we didn't have the time to speak about. So we're going to try to remedy that now. And we're going to talk about some of the books that you've written. But my first question to you is, what made you decide to become an author in the first place? Now, I know as a lawyer and as a litigator, you're called upon to write, but that's not necessarily creative. As a matter of fact, creative writing is probably frowned upon in the law. But what you've done is creative and spiritual. So how is it that you came to start writing that way?
Well, I have always been a poet since I was a teenager. One of my older brothers was a poet, and so that's always been a part of my life. And I had what you would call probably a near-death experience. It's something that I rarely share with people. But when I was about 17, I was on my proverbial deathbed. I was in the hospital. The doctors didn't know what was wrong with me. They had surgeries, etc. And I had a lot of old saints, salt of the earth saints in the South and throughout the country praying for me. And at some point I pulled through. And I remember very clearly the morning that I pulled through. I sat up in my hospital bed. The sun was beaming down. And the Holy Spirit said, "You will live to write." And so that's a very clear calling. But it's not one that I paid heed to, interestingly enough, until after I had practiced law for a long time. After I had written a lot of briefs and a lot of motions and had been under the tutelage of a lot of very senior lawyers who were excellent writers. And all of a sudden, the bell and the whistle went off, and I realized, you know what, you haven't lived up. You haven't done one of the things that you know that you were called to do. And so I began to write a book called Prayers for Those Standing on the Edge of Greatness. And when I first wrote the book, I actually didn't have a title to it. And I was sitting in my office one day, and one of my fellow students in seminary, I was practicing law full time and going to New York Theological Seminary at the same time, and one of my classmates, who was a pastor, came to my office for me to help her with something. She was working on a project for spirituality in women. And before she left my office, she looked at me and she said, "You are just standing on the edge of greatness." And I thought, aha, that's the title for my book. Because this is a book that helps people in whatever their pursuit are, but it gives them some basic spiritual principles about how to move from where they are until the next phase of their life. And so I call it Prayers for Those Standing on the Edge of Greatness. It's not a book that's just comprised of prayers, but it's comprised of spiritual tools and faith and vision and using the power of your words and practicing love in a way that moves you from where you are until the next point in your life.
Well, I would compare your writings to an extent to authors like Florence Scovel Shinn and Catherine Ponder, Neville, and James Allen. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Well, once again, XDL is bringing you some of the finest in neo-soul and soul artists, and we're here today with Shelly Bouchon. And Shelly has been a featured artist on XDL previously, and she's going to be one again in the near future. So we're just going to ask her a number of questions and let people get to know a little bit more about who she is. So Shelly, I guess my first question to you is, when did you first realize that you're a singer? When did you first discover your gift?
You know, people ask me this question, and I basically tell them that I've been singing since I could breathe. As far as I've known myself as like me with memories, I've been singing. And it wasn't that I ever thought for myself, oh yes, I'm really good at singing. It was just something that I loved to do. It was something that I passed the time doing. I remember one of my earliest memories was we were in summer camp, day camp at the YMCA, and there was a really resonant bathroom, and I used to sneak away to the bathroom so I could just listen to the echoes of my voice. And it was just something that I loved to do, and I loved singing pop music, but it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm a singer. I remember singing Tina Turner, Kenny Rogers in the bathroom, random stuff. And I remember in the 5th grade, I ended up joining choir. And it was an after-school program that my dad would pick me up later for. And I remember, you know, starting to learn different parts and actually being really good at it. And actually, the other time that I'm thinking of also is the second grade. They asked me to sing a solo. It was my first time, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I didn't even think that I could do it, but it's always just been part of my life. You know, I don't come from a musical family, so it wasn't like people were encouraging me or discouraging me. It was just who I was, and we played music in the house all the time, but, you know, I just ended up turning into this person who was a singer.
Well, it sounds like second grade was maybe the first time that you performed in public. But what was the first time that you performed professionally?
Oh, okay. Well, my first, well, it depends on what you consider professionally, because
First time someone gave you some money.
oh, I was a singing waitress.
Okay.
And
Well, tell us about that.
well, let's see. In college, there was, or there is actually still, an Italian restaurant chain that had opera singers. And it was a small chain at the time. It's blown up to be really big, and I don't think they have opera singers anymore. But they hired me to be a hostess at first and singer, and I would sing Italian arias. And I, you know, I never, at that point, I had never really indulged me singing pop music except to my friends, and just something that I loved to do. And you know, I'd go around singing art song to different tables, you know, your typical, you know, Verdi or anything. And I remember making, you know, like a $10 tip here or there, and I was in college, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I remember I was also very stiff at the time, because I had been singing, you know, in high school, and I'd never really gotten into my body in terms of the way that I would move. I am not a great dancer, by the way. I'm the worst dancer ever. But I remember there was a bachelorette party, and they didn't want to hear art song, and they were like, oh, I want to hear I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. And I was like, I know how to do that. I've done that in karaoke like 1,000 times.
I guess you lost your sense of humor. No longer think that I'm so clever. Mocking words before they part my lips. A conversation with you can be so damn quick. It all happened in September.
Once again, XDL is pleased to bring you one of our favorite artists, Abia. And we've known this brother for quite some time. And so there are a lot of things we want to talk to him about his career and about his attitude toward music in general. But the first thing that I want to discuss with you falls under the heading of rebranding. Okay? Now, we've seen a number of artists rebrand themselves for any number of reasons. Okay? Prince comes to mind because he was in a dispute with Warner Brothers, and he wanted to recapture his musical compositions and his publishing. Okay? And so everybody's familiar with that. Okay? But in your particular case, you've rebranded recently, and so I'd like to ask you a little bit about that.
I think it was important, you know, I took basically a 6-year break from recording, or at least putting out material in the business, and I think when you have that long of a distance between projects, out of sight, out of mind is what comes to mind for me. And I had a couple of things. That was one of the issues, is that I'd been away for so long. The other was, from my major record deal, there was another kid who came out in the 6 years named Jeremiah. And that became a very, very big issue for me. It was like people were calling me all the time, wanting him.
Confusing
the two of us.
A new, and he's hip hop.
He's hip hop, but I also had my own record out way before him. And it became a thing where we could have gone to court, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought, you know, it has nothing to do with a name, you know. And so I decided to just use my last name as my career name now. It was a way to kind of start again. And I had this new record that I thought was really returning to who I was artistically. Because, in 6 years, you experiment, you play around, you try to find new sounds. But I already had a sound, and I just returned to that. So this record was kind of reintroducing that sound again. So it was a great opportunity to do that.
Well, I also, if you don't mind me complimenting you on this, okay, my observation is that it was a very mature move on your part artistically to do something like that, because there are any number of people that would have dragged him right into federal court, okay, saying that you're infringing on my trademark, okay, and whether they expected to win or not, they get some publicity mileage out of it. So I appreciate your artistic integrity in not doing that. But let me ask you, okay, how did this impact on your established fan base? Because you were out there for a while longer. You've done things. One thing that I really liked that you've done before your hiatus was a video with Shanice.
Yeah.
And so do you think that it somehow impacted on your established fan base?
I think people are still discovering that it's me. I don't think that a lot of people realize that I put out a new record. And I think it was important to get a video out sooner than later, which we did last week via OK Player and The Revivalist. And then, I think it's just about people spreading the word. I have a fan base via email and all of those things, and, we'll get the word out. I think people are slowly figuring out it's me. And, once I start touring again, people realize, oh, that's that guy named Jeremiah.
That's the brother who we like.
Yeah. So.
Well, I'd like to ask you a little something about your artistic development and your early influences. Who were the artists, I'm assuming that they're musical artists, but you might have other influences as well, that influenced you during your formative years in music?
I think for me it's actually been very established artists that kind of were along the journey for me.
Like who?
The first was definitely Anita Baker. She was the first artist I heard as a child and said, man, I want to sound like that. And I was known even as a kid of having this really high voice. So I gravitated towards her music really quickly. I started imitating her, even making the sound and jumbling words. People didn't understand what I was saying, but I could make a great tone.
We met as friends, working on the job. Yeah. Can't pretend, even back then.
Well, XDL is pleased, very pleased, in fact, to be here with Darian. And we have a number of questions we want to ask him. We're just going to talk about his artistry and see what makes the man tick. But my first question to you is about a song that you released, and it's something that I play a lot, okay? It's on my iPod, it's on my wife's iPod. It's a song called Composure. So let me ask you, is Composure your biggest hit to date?
It's funny the way these things work, especially as an indie artist. In one territory, this is your biggest hit. In another territory, this is your biggest hit. I mean, Composure has definitely done really well for us. We released a video for it, for that reason, especially here in the U.S., it's done really well. I would say in a show there's like 3 or 4 that really I think just capture the vibe of the record, and Composure is definitely one of them. It's in the top. It's in the top. Yeah.
So we looked at the video, and so my question to you is that did you actually get with the engineer or?
To be a continued partner. We're working on some other videos, so we'll answer those questions.
It can be like part 3.
Right. It's a cliffhanger.
But it was one of those things where the video, it actually is a story, and it's something that, unlike just a lot of stuff that you see these days, which is simply images or whatever for sensational purposes, this tracked the lyrics, okay, and it made a lot of sense, okay, and I could understand why, met her on the job, okay, but okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that was cool. I kind of like to ask you about your artistry, and the first thing I want to ask you is about your influences, okay, and so during your formative years in music, who were you inspired by, and were there people that you wanted to emulate?
You know, when I came up, I mean, I was listening to probably originally a lot of what was on the radio, you know, top 40 kind of stuff. But when I really came into my own was when I started listening to artists like Michael Jackson and Stevie. You know, they kind of like touched my soul and just made me really get in tune with like just what they were doing melodically and lyrically. Even later on, that really became something that, you know, I got in touch with.
Okay, and are there people that you're listening to these days? Any current influences that you have?
You know, it's funny. The people that I listen to nowadays are my friends. You know, so it became one of those things.
Like
I'm fortunate to know artists like Eric Roberson and Cy Smith and Gerard Anthony, whose record I'm on, and Angela Johnson. You know, so it's kind of like the people that I listen to at this moment are really a lot of other independent artists, because I really feel like they're putting out some of the best music right now.
Well, I'm a huge Cy Smith fan.
Indeed.
Okay? As a matter of fact, I just saw her at Blue Note a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
she throws down too. So.
Don't she though?
Indeed.
And Zoe. And
yes.
Zoe was dealing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other contemporary artists that you're checking out? People that you may not necessarily know, but their music you've heard?
You know, it's while I'm in the process of working on a record, if I'm being honest, I don't listen to a lot of other artists because I know that you can pull, you know, from other things. So a lot of it is reflecting on things that I'm writing and things of that nature. So I don't really reach out to too many things. I'll go on like the blog sites and kind of like get a taste of everybody's stuff, but none of them are really in full rotation. You know, I definitely did dig Frank Ocean's new record from a lyrical standpoint. I felt like he was bringing something to the game, and I'm really into the art of songwriting. So, you know, when somebody comes along like that and I'm like, oh, you know, there's a little more depth here than, you know, one listen, you're not going to get it. I really get into that kind of
Unless
stuff.
it's Novocaine, which you get right away.
Well, yeah. There's
okay.
definitely that. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, I find that interesting because a lot of artists closely check out, you know, other people in the field, okay, and they think, well, gee, okay, this person got a hit doing this, you know, so you're trying to stay away from, you know.
I can't do that. Like, in all honesty, you know, once again, going back to the songwriting thing, the songs and the stories are my own to tell. So really, listening to somebody else's stories doesn't really give me any real influence or any inspiration more than I just like the song. You know, it's a process that's really unique to me as a person. It's my fingerprint is on these records. So I'll listen. You know, I'm not somebody who gauges what's popular and like, oh, I'm going to put that on the record at all.
XDL, of course, is interested in more than music. We're interested in your music, but we're also interested in your life and your way. And so a big part of what we're trying to do is is connected to the lifestyle, okay? And we are very pleased this evening to have Dr. Leon Merrick with us, okay, who is a health professional, and we're going to get into his practice in a moment. But before we do, there are a couple of statistics that, you know, I took note of, and they're actually, I guess, very disturbing to me. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has done a study on the health of Black or African American non-Hispanic people in this country. And they've compiled statistics saying that 13.9% of African Americans of all ages are in fair or poor health. 38% of men who are 20 years of age or older are obese in our community. 54% of women who are age 20 and over are obese in our community. The percentage of men in our community age 20 and over with hypertension is 37%, and the percentage of women age 20 or over with hypertension is 44% in our community. And so as you might imagine, that leads to high rates of mortality, and the leading causes of death in our community is heart disease, cancer, and stroke. And so it turns out, apparently, that poverty is bad for your health. And when we talk about poverty in this country, we talk about race because over 50% of Black and Latino young adults live in poverty compared with less than 30% of white young adults. And so the effect of poverty on health has been clearly documented. And people who live in poverty are more likely to have asthma and diabetes. They're 5 times more likely to be exposed to lead paint as children. They're twice as likely to have untreated cavities, which can lead to heart disease or infection and even death. Well, when I read that, then I knew I had to talk to Dr. Merrick, okay? Because a lot of us are familiar with some of the maladies that plague our community. We know about obesity, we know about diabetes, but heart disease resulting from poor oral health was a new one for me. And so that's what we'd like to talk to you about. And maybe you can, shed some light on this and tie this into your practice.
All right. Well, good evening. My name is Leon Merrick. I'm a dentist in the Harlem community. And as Brother Coley was saying, we have a multitude of illnesses that plague our community. And some of the illnesses stem from our lifestyle, our habits. For example, you mentioned high blood pressure, diabetes, things like that. When we were slaves back in the cotton patch, we would work off those high-calorie, high-fat meals. We just burn it up. However, things have changed. Now we live a more sedentary existence. We don't burn up those calories, even though soul food tastes good, smells good. We eat it more than we should, frequency-wise. But what happens because we don't exercise, because our kids, when you look at them now, you say, Johnny, go outside and play. Johnny says, oh, Ma, do I have to?
Last night I got mad. I said things I shouldn't have said. No. Him to know how deeply I feel. I wouldn't even let him talk.
Alrighty then, once again, xvidl.com is very, very happy to, we're going to engage in an organic interview with one of our favorite artists and with someone who apparently is a musical and otherwise collaborator. We're sitting here with Avery Sunshine and Dana Johnson.
Yes.
So we're glad to have you both here. And this is happening by courtesy of Shanachie Records and Monifa Brown, who we love dearly, who arranged all this for us.
We do too.
So we have a lot of things that we want to talk about in a short period of time. So why don't we just get right down to it? And the first thing I wanted to ask you about is, now you're living in the ATL these days, right? But you are originally from Philly,
Yes,
right?
Chester.
Chester, that's outside of...
9 miles south of Philly. My father told me I had to say it that way.
9
miles south of Philadelphia.
So my question to you is, what is it about Philly? Is it something in the water? I mean, why do you get all these, talented, and not only in R&B, historically, but a lot of jazz artists, came out of Philadelphia, and some pop people too. So what is it about that environment?
I don't know. I wish I knew what it was. What's so funny is I've been away from there I left when I was 18, and I can go to different places in the world, and they say, you sound like you're from Philly. I was like, what? I don't know. Well, I don't know what that sounds like. I don't know what it is. And I know I sang with my introduction into the industry and the Philly, some of the Philly sound. I sang with the Wilmington Chester Mass Choir, which was a really big recording choir back in the day. Darryl Coley, they actually had some stellar wins. The song "He's Preparing Me Sovereign," some really big things. And that was my introduction to the music industry, and I don't know what it is about Philly. The water, the cheesesteaks, I don't know.
Cheesesteaks, Geno's or Geno's?
No, neither. No. You have to get it from the corner.
Oh, really?
Any corner.
All right.
Don't go to, you don't want to go to the ones that they show you on TV. No, you want to go to the corner store and get it from there. Where it's greasy and all the grease.
So now we have some culinary tips. Direct from the artist.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you, now you left Philadelphia to go to Spelman.
Yeah,
is that correct?
I did.
So why Spelman?
Because my brother went to Morehouse.
All right, that says it all.
He told me there was nowhere else for me to go.
He's a Morehouse man.
Morehouse man. He told me there was nowhere else for me to go.
All right.
And we went to Fisk. As a matter of fact, I applied to Fisk, Clark Atlanta, NYU, North Carolina A&T, and Spelman. And I was not accepted at Spelman. Every other school accepted me. They got a call from the music department, the chair of the department. Oh, Denise, we'd love for you to join the music department at Spelman. I'd gotten a rejection letter. They called, we thought about it. We'd love for you to join the department. What?
And that's what you did?
That's what I did.
Now, who's that bad brother down there? Joe Jennings?
Joe Jennings, Mr. Jennings. I think he just retired too.
Oh, really?
He was great. I took orchestration with him, and my writing partner at the time, my best friend and sister, Maya Wilson, we stayed in the department for 24 hours because we had not done any work the whole semester. 24 hours finishing our final. And I chose the most difficult piece I could find and to orchestrate. The most difficult piece I could find to orchestrate. I don't know why I did that. I wish I could find that stuff today. And we got through that night listening to Michael Jackson's Off the Wall record.